Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Priyanka Sharma. Here's our lineup for tonight. Are you planning a trip to Thailand? An exciting holiday with friends, your last hurrah before tying the knot? Tonight I'll tell you why you need to cancel that trip and you need to act fast. Else you could be bringing the Wuhan virus back with you as a deadly souvenir. Thailand has fallen prey to China's bullying tactics. It has been arm-twisted into letting in infected travelers by China. Why do I say that? Because China is back to its old tricks again. It is bullying other nations to suit its own needs. Remember, we told you how it was threatening the world with retaliation. Retaliation for what? For safeguarding citizens, for protecting them or trying to protect them from the Wuhan virus, for imposing travel restrictions on China. Today, I'll tell you how China has now officially begun this retaliation. Also on the show, a new report gives us a sense of what might happen if China invades Taiwan. Who will stand to win and who will lose? What's at stake? We break down the report and bring you all the possibilities. Have you heard of rage applying? It's the new trend in jobs. It's only January and people are sending out their resumes to anyone and everyone. Is this good for you in the long run? And we've all heard this one. Artificial intelligence is out to get your jobs. Today, I'll tell you something scarier. AI could soon replace your brain. What happens to academic integrity when students use an AI tool to write their essays? And on the show tonight, I'll also tell you why parents across the world are saying one and done. They're making a conscious choice to have only one child. What are the consequences of this decision? All coming up on the show tonight. Should you be visiting Bangkok? In case you're planning to, cancel that thought right away. I will tell you why. Bangkok and other Thai cities could be filled with COVID-infected Chinese visitors. Why? Thailand has succumbed to Beijing's bullying. Remember earlier, like other sensible nations, it had imposed basic tests for all those travelling from Chinese cities, where COVID had been rampant. But within days, after pressure from Beijing, Thailand has removed all those checks. Now, it will let Chinese passengers pass through immigration without any RT-PCR test. They will be able to check into hotels without declaring whether or not they are infected with the Wuhan virus. Infected Chinese travelers will be able to share a tour bus with you, be on the same boat as you. They will be able to sit next to you at the bar at a shop, even inside the same swimming pool as you. And guess what? You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know whether or not the person next to you is infected and is infecting you. Because Thailand is too scared to offend the mighty Chinese government, which has now abandoned all concerns about public health and safety. Thailand is expecting some 10 million Chinese tourists in the coming months. Forget testing. Chinese tourists are not even required to show any proof of vaccination to enter Thailand. And do you know why? Because showing a proof of vaccination would be cumbersome and inconvenient. That's the line of reasoning that Thai authorities want you to believe. The question is, do you buy into it? No one in their right mind will. We get that Thailand is desperate for tourism revenue. But surely it can be a little more in touch with the on-ground reality. Because let's face it, China is brimming with COVID cases. 70%, I repeat, 70% of Shanghai residents are sick. 90% of Hainan residents are sick. You have daily flights from these cities coming to Thailand. Simple math says that more than 50% of passengers are likely to be sick. So will you just stamp their passports and let them into your cities? I ask the Thai leadership tonight, have you no concern for your own citizens or the health of tourists from other countries? For Thais working in the hospitality sector, your tuk-tuk drivers, tourism will become counterproductive, a false economic benefit. And what about you? Do you still want to visit Thailand? For some revelry in Bangkok, perhaps? Do you still want to go ahead with that trip to Phuket and Koh Phangan? We're doing our bit by warning you against it. The decision is ultimately yours. China is not testing its citizens before sending them abroad. Beijing has already dropped that ball. Instead of imposing safety measures, China is going after governments which are trying to keep their locals safe. China has blocked South Korean tourists and travelers, and the Japanese in a punitive response. Remember, I spoke about retaliation. Chinese missions in these countries are not issuing any visas. South Koreans constitute the biggest foreign diaspora in China. But if a South Korean wants to visit her family in Beijing, she can't. She can't even transit through China at this point or visit Beijing for business. Same with the Japanese. China has blocked visas for business, tourism, transit, and for personal reasons. So what did South Korea do? It adopted basic safety protocols. Seoul has restricted travel from China. It has allowed flights from Macau and Hong Kong to land only at one airport. All passengers arriving in South Korea are being asked to take an RT-PCR test, not just before travel, but also after landing. And caution is not sitting well with China. China has vowed to fight travel restrictions with reciprocal measures. And Beijing is calling these measures discriminatory. But that's China for you. If you like to spin the story, call an outbreak fake news. Call precaution politics. And safety measures discriminatory. The question is, what does the world need to do? Go the South Korea way? Or roll out the red carpet like Thailand? I don't need to answer that. Countries must put their foot down and not bow down to China. You can't have infected Chinese travelers trotting about your towns and infecting people. China wants exactly that, and that's exactly why it has threatened countries who believe in safe health. Tell me one thing, what really is China's problem? What does it have a problem with? Why does it have a problem with its tourists being tested for the longest time? In fact, till very recently, China was testing its own people with an almost frightening intensity. If you wanted to board a bus in Beijing, you needed to get yourself tested first. If you wanted to enter a park, RT-PCR test again. Same with all public places. These were mass testing camps all around mainland China, and now the same China has turned an amazing somersault, even as the Wuhan infection has spiraled. What gives? Either China is trying to hide a variant, or it simply enjoys being a troublemaker. Worse still, here is a scary thought. Is China trying to reinfect the world? On the evidence, it is difficult to rule out that the assumption as of now. Some critics are even calling this Xi Jinping's biological warfare. South Korea and Japan are the first of China's victims in the Wuhan wave. Sure, both countries will feel the burn, especially their businesses. but their measures are working for them. Look at what the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency is saying. It says the number of Chinese travelers testing positive has gone down ever since Seoul adopted these new restrictions. Earlier, 31.4% of them were testing positive. Now, the number is 12.6%. It's a success story. The world must adopt this model too. Many countries, including India, have already introduced additional safety measures for those coming in from China. One hopes that they don't let their guards down too soon. And in the meanwhile, it's time for you to reconsider your trip to Thailand. If you can't cancel, at least postpone. Why stop at a biological warfare when you can also plan for a more traditional war? In fact, it's one that has been in the making for years now. China has grand plans, you see. I'm talking about the invasion of Taiwan. It is no longer a question of if it will happen, but when. China has carried out numerous dress rehearsals, but none has been able to tell us what really happens on D-Day. What happens when the Chinese military marches towards Taiwan? Now, one American think tank has come up with a few answers. The Center for Strategic and International Studies says that the Chinese invasion of Taiwan will fail. In other words, the dragon's dreams won't come to life. But, yes, there's a but. This think tank says that this will only happen if America helps defend Taiwan. I told you, this is an American think tank. So you shouldn't be surprised that the role of Washington is being played up. Now, will Washington step in to defend Taiwan? US President Joe Biden says, yes, America will defend Taiwan. In fact, Biden has said this publicly not once, not twice, but 4 times. There was a time when America thrived on its policy of strategic ambiguity. But now, as American experts talk of the possible invasion of Taiwan, American strategy seems all but ambiguous. But America won't be alone in defending Taiwan. If the US goes to war, its allies are likely to follow. And Japan will be the first one. The war will be too close to home. Look at this map now. Look at how close Taiwan, China and Japan are to each other geographically. The Japanese prefecture, Okinawa, is just 600 kilometers from Taiwan. Goes without saying, stray bullets will land there too. And Japan will be dragged in. So, Tokyo is preparing for this scenario. We have been telling you how Japan has gone back on its post-war pacifism. I don't know how many of you know this, but Japan's post-World War II constitution does not recognize the military. Just a self-defense force with nominal ammunition. And Japan is now changing with the times. It has revamped the country's national security strategy. The country is stockpiling spare parts, ammunition. Japan is arming its military, and this is in preparation for the Taiwan war. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is not shy to admit this in public. His government's national security paper says that Russia has set a precedent by invading Ukraine, and now Tokyo believes that China will be encouraged to attack Taiwan. And this will threaten Japanese islands and important sea routes. The paper claims, and I quote, "The strategic challenge posed by China is the biggest Japan has ever faced." So what is Japan doing about it? The government is doubling its defense budget. Japan will be spending about 2% of its GDP on defense. The country has also increased the defense ministry's share to about 1/10 of all public spending. This makes Japan the 3rd biggest military spender, from pacifist to the world's 3rd biggest military spender. So will the drastic swing be enough to match China's might? Now let me come back to the assessment by this American think tank. The Center for Strategic and International Studies says that Japan will experience enormous losses in the Taiwan war. But Japan will not be the only one bleeding. China will also destroy the US air bases in Japan. We are talking as far as Guam. This think tank believes that China would also sink 2 US aircraft carriers, between 10 and 20 destroyers and cruisers. So what about the Chinese casualties? The think tank believes that China's invading force would be destroyed even before it manages to capture any significant part of Taiwan. As for Taipei, the Chinese army will never be able to make it to the capital city. Now the obvious question is, how did these people arrive at this conclusion while sitting in America? Well, they played war games. They tested 24 scenarios, all focused on one goal: China's attempt to seize Taiwan. They have visualized how the invasion will play out. These are interesting details. You may want to listen in closely. This group of experts believes China will begin the invasion with bombardment. The PLA will bomb most of Taiwan's Navy and Air Force. This will happen in a matter of hours. Then, the Chinese Navy would encircle Taiwan. Thousands of PLA soldiers and their equipment will be ferried across the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan won't be sitting quietly. It would sink the incoming Chinese vessels. The US submarines, bombers and fighters will cripple the Chinese amphibious fleet. The US will be held by Japan's self-defense forces, and China will then strike back and bomb Japanese bases and US ships. I repeat, this is all hypothetical, of course. And at the end of the day, it is predicted that it will be Taiwan's victory and Taiwan will remain autonomous, or so believe these American experts. Sounds like a dream on paper. But let me be clear, there's little to no guarantee that the same sequence of events will play out when and if China goes to war. Also, we have only accounted for what happens when America defends Taiwan. Chances are it may not. What if there is a new American president? What if America changes its mind, its policy? So what happens if the US does not run to save Taiwan? In that case, experts believe that Taiwan will fall in 3 months, could be less. So are the Americans trying to flatter themselves, or is this casual provocation? Let's get one thing clear. No matter which side wins, there will be a great loss of lives in this war. This think tank too admits that within weeks of the war, as many as 10,000 people could die. Also, what happens if the war takes a nuclear turn? Japan knows the answer to that question. The Chinese have nukes. So do the Americans. Neither of the two will want to be seen as the weaker side. Push comes to shove, either Beijing or Washington could be forced to press the nuclear button. What happens then? There's only one way to avoid this. Forget the war games, forget the actual wars, the ones fought in the past and the ones that armies are preparing for at present to win in the future. It's time to move on. Moving on, I have some questions for you. Are you feeling unappreciated at your job? Are you often overlooked by your manager and frequently passed over for a promotion? Does your compensation barely make up for the terrible hours and the effort that you put in? Then you might find this new TikTok trend appealing. It's called rage applying. Here's how it works. You feel dissatisfied at your current workplace, so you decide to get even with your boss. You strive to find a place that would appreciate you more and pay you better. But researching every company takes time. It's tedious. Time that you don't seem to have. So you decide to shoot your resume and see what sticks. You aggressively shoot out resumes to several companies to find a new job and a hefty pay rise without running a background check or devising a game plan, a strategy. It's become a matter of quantity rather than quality. The more job offers, the merrier. At least this is what Gen Z and millennials are resorting to these days, and the reasons are many. Poor working conditions for one. TikTokers have shared their stories on the social media platform. They say they are mistreated at work. They say they are taken advantage of and unjustly denied promotions and raises. And even if they get an increment, it is rarely inflation adjusted. The employers are failing to keep up with the market. So what is an easy solution? Looking for better opportunities instead of staying stuck in a miserable loop. After reaching their breaking point, Gen Z is applying to dozens or even hundreds of jobs to leave their current company. And they seem quite happy about it. Some claim that they've received multiple job offers with substantial increases in compensation. That too within days or a few weeks of submitting resumes. Of course, if you will be sending applications to hundreds of organizations, some of them will turn out to be in your favor. Now, before you sign off on this trend as impulsive Gen Z behavior, let's look at some more facts. There's no denying that baby boomers and millennials worked very hard on their careers. They even gave decades of their life to a single organization. While this can be touted as loyalty and consistency, there are several other factors at play. Primarily, the global economy. Young adults in the workforce don't have it easy. The US is dealing with record high inflation. Just look at these figures now. The inflation in the last 2 years is beyond comparison to the years before. The cost of everything, from food to automobiles, from health facilities to real estate, all prices have skyrocketed. And this has affected all of us, but young adults more so. The extra costs of living are eating into their meager savings. The Federal Reserve Bank is hiking interest rates like anything. Young couples have been priced out of the housing market. The average price of an apartment in New York City is around $5,000 a month. $5,000. Most of the white collars already struggle with a heavy college tuition burden. They have student loans to pay off, parents to support. And amid all this, a person is left with little discretionary income. But sadly, employers don't seem to understand any of this. They are offering increments according to pre-pandemic levels. This is not realistic in today's world. When employees try to do better, they are left pouting at their naive decisions. But let me say this, there is a larger societal issue at play. Rage applying is just a new addition to workplace trends. Companies have already seen quiet quitting, acting your wage, ghosting, and how can we forget the great resignation? And what all these trends have in common is a lack of communication and little foresight. Workers prefer taking stealthy action rather than confronting their bosses and engaging in conversations. Without first speaking with your manager or human resources, their go-to response is ghosting an employer, and that's concerning. They abruptly shoot out their resumes, leave the employer in doubt. They wonder, where did they go wrong? This seems like a generational thing. You might disagree with me, but the younger cohort is more averse to picking up the phone or asking for an in-person conversation. The disgruntled worker could share his or her feelings and articulate why they feel unappreciated. This might even lead to a promotion or a higher bonus. But nobody seems to like confrontation, and it is comparatively easier to apply for a new job. But let's now look at how realistic this new trend is, rage applying. As I already told you, it involves little to no research or foresight. You are just blindly sending out your resumes. While you might get an attractive compensation, maybe even a better job profile. But how effective is this in the long run? Do the company's values align with yours? Does it have growth opportunities to offer? And who knows how the work culture could be? And whether or not it will align with your long-term goals. Now that is something that TikTokers don't seem to be sharing with us. They have painted quite the rosy picture of switching jobs one after the other. But the downsides are rarely talked about because they don't sell well on social media. TikTok has been influencing netizens, especially Gen Z, a little too much. I'll say this. Before basing our life decisions on an app, a social media platform, we must remember that the Chinese social media company has also bent some rules. I'm talking about TikTok. And now the European Union isn't too happy about it. TikTok recently violated transparency requirements according to its algorithms. And this is what the bloc has to say. I'm quoting. I'll remind TikTok's president to respect the integrity of our rules, which are very protective of our citizens and the obligations they'll have, including on the transparency of their algorithm. Now pay attention to these words. The EU Commissioner is saying that he wants to remind TikTok to respect these rules. A country normally asks a company to obey its rules and fall in line. And if they are constantly violating and putting the user's privacy at risk, it asks them to exit. It shows them the door. At least that's what India did. It banned the Chinese social media platform when it posed a threat to privacy. But the EU isn't doing that. Instead, it is very politely asking TikTok to respect its rule book. Is this a sign of weakness? What is the EU afraid of? If anything, it should be afraid of meaningless trends and content that TikTok promotes, some even more dangerous than the next. And it is the user which is falling prey to all of them. Let's move on. What happened in Brazil on Sunday has sent alarm bells ringing. Former President Bolsonaro's supporters stormed political buildings. But what they also seem to have attacked is democracy. When rioters invaded the presidential palace and the Supreme Court, they made it clear that they are not respecting the results of an election. That they can go to any length to reinstate a leader, one who aligns with their own ideologies, irrespective of what the masses of the country decided. And Brazil is just a recent example, which has reminded the world of the state of democracy in Latin America. Let me explain. In the late 1970s, 17 out of 20 Latin American nations were ruled by dictators. But only 20 years later, 18 had replaced the iron fist with functioning democracies. A new sense of possibility began to take root among liberal politicians. By the end of the 1980s, democratic elections reached Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Nicaragua, Paraguay, and Peru. Eventually, Panama, El Salvador, and Guatemala also followed suit. Mexico was a little late, but at the turn of the century, it became one of Latin America's most exemplary democracies with its orderly elections. Initially, the democratic idea worked well for Latin America. It brought along unprecedented economic growth and a modest rise of the middle class. But that was before Latin American democracy changed itself. These elected presidents expanded the military's role. They suspended the constitution, dodged prosecution, and blocked checks on their power. They perpetuated their rules and morphed into leaders comparable to dictators. Democracy in Latin America has come under threat in recent years. Anti-democratic leaders have challenged human rights across the world. The economies have suffered a decade of stagnation or slow growth. The people are frustrated by the lack of opportunity in the region. They have turned this anger against their politicians, their leaders, who are widely seen as corrupt and self-serving. Take the case of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, Mexican President Andrés Manuel, and El Salvador's Nayib Bukele. They have all threatened the basic freedoms inherent to a democracy. Judicial independence and free press have been affected. Which brings me to this question. Is democracy failing in Latin America? What's happening in Peru in particular is now raising alarm. Political and economic unrest has gripped the country. In the latest incidents, 17 have been killed in anti-government protests. And seeing the situation, the figures are only expected to rise further. This next detailed report has more.
Peru is struggling with a political turmoil. Ousted President Pedro Castillo is currently in detention. He is being investigated on charges of rebellion and conspiracy. Castillo was arrested in December for trying to dissolve Congress, and since then his supporters have been protesting and blockading roads. They are demanding snap elections and asking new President Dina Boluarte to resign. At least 17 people have died. As Castillo's supporters clashed with security forces in southeastern Peru. It was the highest death toll since the unrest began in early December. On Monday, protests were reported in about 13% of Peruvian provinces. Many of them made it impossible for truckers to deliver produce to the market. President Boluarte has supported a plan to push for 2024 elections. These elections were originally scheduled for 2026. But the riots continue unfazed. Peru has been gripped by political unrest for a few years. Former President Pedro Castillo's tenure failed to live up to expectations. Castillo's campaign was impressive. His promises were ambitious. But his administrative skills? Not so much. Many of his appointees were unpopular among the public. They faced all sorts of allegations, ranging from corruption to domestic violence. Castillo himself faced criminal investigation on charges of corruption, profiteering, and obstruction of justice. COVID-19 hit Peru hard. It caused large-scale economic distress. Castillo inherited pre-existing issues when he came to power. But his inability to guide Peru out of the situation proved to be his undoing. In March 2022, a motion to impeach Castillo failed in the parliament. Thousands of demonstrators took to the streets of Lima. They called for Castillo's resignation. Protests also gripped much of rural Peru, the areas which used to be Castillo's strongholds. By December, Castillo faced yet another impeachment vote, and this time he enjoyed less support than he previously did. Feeling his grip on power loosening, Castillo decided to dissolve Congress. He announced a curfew on December 7th. However, his plan failed immediately. Castillo had overestimated his political support. His time was up. The armed forces quickly put out a statement condemning his actions. The Peruvian legislature finally managed to impeach Castillo. He is now serving 18 months of pre-trial detention on charges of rebellion. But the protests didn't stop. Peru's problems were far from over. Demonstrations are still going strong in the country, and this time Castillo's supporters are on the spearhead. They are demanding his release from the jail. They are calling for snap elections. Despite President Boluarte's 2024 proposition, Boluarte says she cannot grant some of the protesters' key demands. She has called for citizens to reflect, but they don't seem to be reflecting. This comes as another Latin American country faces political unrest. I'm talking about Brazil. Jair Bolsonaro's supporters left a trail of destruction in the presidential palace. Congress and the Supreme Court. Busloads of rioters have been detained. Continued such incidents pose serious questions about the future of Latin America. Is democracy overall failing in the region? What is the solution?
Pope Francis has long been famous for his liberal papacy. For his supporters, he has been a much-needed change for the Church. Pope Francis has painted a more welcoming picture of Catholicism. His statements regarding controversial matters such as abortion and homosexuality have made his leadership successful among his followers. But they haven't gone down too well with the conservatives of the Church. Conservative Catholic voices have criticized the Pope's approach and methods. And amid evidence of a growing rebellion against his liberal papacy, the Pope summoned a conservative ally of his predecessor, Pope Benedict. And this was to the Vatican. Archbishop George Gangsween is the former secretary to Pope Benedict, and the meeting comes only 4 days after he was laid to rest. This week, Gangsween is publishing a book titled Nothing But the Truth, My Life Beside Benedict XVI, in which he has made some big claims. The former papal prefect has described his ouster by Pope Francis in 2020. He writes, Pope Francis told him not to come back to work tomorrow. He has also claimed that Pope Francis's decision was disapproved by Pope Benedict. Apart from that, the book also includes Pope Benedict's alleged disagreements with Pope Francis. It says the conflicts were about Pope Francis's liberal ways. The Argentinian Pope had restricted traditional Latin Mass. His move was aimed at fighting divisiveness and was caused by inappropriate use of the Mass. But the decision was criticized by conservative Catholics. Gangsween said that Pope Francis's restrictions had broken the heart of Benedict. Many Catholics who attended the traditional Latin Mass worried that Pope Francis did not understand them. Pope Benedict also disapproved of Pope Francis's views on abortion and, of course, the LGBTQ community. Gangsween's publication comes at a peculiar time. It has prompted interesting accusations that he aspires to become a champion for conservative Catholics, those who loathe Pope Francis's liberal-leaning papacy and who disapprove the Latin Mass restrictions. Even though Pope Benedict wasn't a fan of Pope Francis, he discouraged open opposition to him. But after his death, analysts suspect that Pope Francis's haters may now become more determined. In line with standard practice, the details of the meeting between Pope Francis and Gangsween haven't been disclosed by the Vatican press office yet. But experts are speculating that the Pope summoned him to offer an olive branch. The Pope might reason that he needs to give Gangsween a new job to stop him from going rogue. In his Sunday address, the Pope denounced gossip. He has called it a lethal weapon. This is being seen as an attack on Gangsween's book. Although Pope Francis has been criticizing gossip regularly for years, his meeting with a conservative ally has raised eyebrows, especially when there has been evidence of criticism surrounding his papacy. So did the Pope Francis, offer Gangsween another chance, or did he give him a week to pack up and leave the Vatican? Nobody knows. But many are asking, is there a rebellion against Pope Francis? His papacy has been accused of straying from the Church's objective moral standards and has raised questions about the future. Is the disapproval finally bubbling over? Is artificial intelligence going to replace your brain? That's the question I want to ask you all today. I say this because a shocking news report has given us all a glimpse into the future. This one comes from Australia. Universities are aiming to return to old-school pen and paper exams. Why? Because students were caught cheating. No, I'm not talking about passing notes under desks. I'm talking about using an AI tool to write essays. Naturally, teachers are worried. Imagine this. You're a teacher in high school. You want to train your students in critical thinking, free expression of views, thoughts, opinions. You want to teach them how to articulate their thoughts, and here they are using a tech tool to do the dirty homework for them. Gone are the days when dogs ate the homework. Now robots are doing all the work for them. If you're a parent, this isn't news to you. You probably have a teenager at home using AI to his or her advantage. Using tech to solve complex equations. Using tech to compose prose. Using tech to decode complex literature. And you must be thinking, why should we worry? You're raising the future. A tech-enabled future, a tech-empowered future. Students using artificial intelligence to write their essays. Some of you say this was bound to happen. We keep talking about artificial intelligence coming for our jobs, of technology making most traditional jobs redundant. But this particular incident has teachers worried because now they are concerned. How are they to assess students anymore? How are we all to gauge how our children are performing in academics? While this may not be outright cheating, it does raise questions of academic integrity. Where is the originality of thought? An essay is supposed to be a representation of your viewpoint, of how you see the world, how you articulate everyday events. If artificial intelligence is doing all the thinking for you, can you just tell your brain to take early retirement? Or park it somewhere for other tasks, perhaps gaming? We've told you before that technology is making inroads into all aspects of our life. We've got smart gadgets in our bedrooms. We've got voice assistants telling us what to cook, what to buy, where to shop. For many toddlers, Alexa or Siri are the first words instead of mum and dad. We've got free translators helping us pretend that we are globe-trotting influencers. And artificial intelligence, anything which doesn't involve using your actual brain, is wiping out sectors, making jobs and roles redundant. You may be shocked to hear this, but AI can now write rap lyrics for you, possibly better than your favorite rap artist. There's an AI tool for every need. This is a story as old as time. Since the beginning of large-scale industrialization, automation has led to job losses. Whole cities like Detroit fell victim to this when the car industry replaced workers with robots. And the future will have more of this. Look at this report. It's from the World Economic Forum. It says that AI is expected to replace 85 million jobs globally by 2025. This trend took center stage during the pandemic. Have you ever thought, what is the impact of a robot on your job? It's significant. Say you work in a factory. Research says that for every robot added per 1,000 workers in the United States, wages decline by 0.42%. Yes, your salary takes a hit. And remember, a robot does not discriminate. It is coming for both blue and white collar jobs. So let's talk about the use of AI in academics. This new case study from Australia is quite alarming. Teachers say they are fighting a losing battle against artificial intelligence. Several institutions have said that the use of AI falls under cheating. Have you heard of ChatGPT? It was launched in November by OpenAI. It has now been banned across all devices in New York's public schools. Why? Because ChatGPT is like brain on demand. It's the new AI tool in town and it's free. It can write you a thesis on the reasons behind the American Civil War. It can wax eloquent about any global leader, any polarizing figure in any period of history, and all in a matter of minutes. I won't lie, it's quite impressive and a daunting peek into the future. But what will the student do? What will she learn about history, about perspective, about global events if a chatbot is writing her essay for her? How will a child form his or her worldview? So that explains why ChatGPT is banned in New York City schools. After all, it raises the ease and risks of cheating, of copying other published works, otherwise known as plagiarism. So the use of artificial intelligence in academics is my concern. Children's brains are being rewired. There was a time when kids sat down to ponder, which global leader do they see as a role model? Now, they can feed the topic into a software, get different viewpoints on demand. In fact, opinion is also up for sale if you have a premium subscription, of course. And if grammar isn't your strong suit, there is also software to ensure that your final submission is nothing short of a Shakespearean tragedy. But there is another tragedy to consider. How do you assess such a student who uses an AI tool for her assignments, who uses software to correct grammatical errors, and hands in the perfect paper? Simple answer, you can't assess a student like this, and you shouldn't. He or she may be tech savvy, but cannot be marked on originality of thought. Then there is the argument that AI does more good than harm. It saves time. It creates tech-empowered leaders for tomorrow. Those who work smart, not hard. After all, did calculators destroy numeracy? No, they didn't. But they did reduce our ability to add and subtract with speed, to multiply big numbers. There was a time when people knew mathematical tables by heart. Now they question the use of such a skill. But remember, if you say that AI will create more jobs than destroy, you will need one ingredient to take over that job: your brain. But if your brain surrenders to an AI tool, what happens then? If your child relies on technology to do all the thinking, what happens then? Since we're talking about children, let me ask you some personal questions. Do you want children? If yes, how many? I know these are intrusive questions, but I have reasons for asking them. Because a new trend is set to take over families of the future. It's called one and done. It's a conscious parenting choice. Forget about sibling rivalry, sibling fights, the notions of a complete family. Parents want to stop after having one child, and so they say one and done. If you look at social media, the journey from conception to motherhood is a booming business. One search for something baby-related and your entire news feed will be flooded. Color-coordinated nurseries, matching furniture, stuffed toys to go with the cot, not the baby. And a whole industry feeds into our vulnerability. Angelic babies peep out from Instagram posts, pulling at your heartstrings. Modern-day parenting is painted quite differently on social media. But this is the reality in 2023. When you get the good news, you may not rush to social media for a mood board. You may not head out and search for the perfect blanket. Instead, you sit down and make a spreadsheet. You account for expenses. You factor in your maternity leave and, if you're lucky, paternity leave. You make a separate tab for upcoming expenses for potential family holidays, renovations, a baby shower, if you will, a baby moon if you're feeling indulgent. But at some point, you need to think beyond the toddler years. You factor in higher education, the best schools, universities, extracurriculars, and you see that big inflated number at the bottom. You know the feeling. It's like a balloon deflating, and you decide one and you're done. There was a time when couples looked at family photos and planned for a second child. There was a time when they wanted to give a companion to their first, so they planned for a second child. Now all these considerations are going out the window. Parents are tossing aside all pressures, all compulsions, all expectations to have more than one child. They're blocking annoying posts from family members, relatives, influencers about the so-called complete family. In fact, one and done is a global trend. In the EU, 49% of families with children have one child. In Canada, only child families make the largest group, while 18% of women in America had one child till about 2015. And in Japan, people are choosing none over one and done. The birth rate is declining, so much so the government has offered to pay people to have babies to boost the birth rate. So why this change in ideology? Well, for one, rising costs of living. You may have heard this one. It's easy having a kid, but very expensive raising one. Have you ever thought of the money involved? In the US, raising 2 children on average costs more than $310,000. This doesn't include college tuition. In the UK, raising one child costs approximately $190,000. I could go on, but I bet you get the point. All this while we've entered a new year with fears of a looming recession, news of job cuts, mass layoffs. This has dissuaded young parents from expanding their families. There are more reasons. One of the most important factors is time. They say it takes a village to raise a kid. From grandparents, external help, to friends and family, you need all the support you can get. But modern-day parents are finding it hard to carve out time. You see, rules of parenting have changed. Raising a child is not just about feeding them, clothing them, educating them, worrying about their health. You have to connect with your child today. Be aware of their emotional needs, their influences, their role models, their exposure to a world where the rules keep on changing. But where is the time? Especially when you have to pay the bills for all those extracurriculars, those workshops, family holidays. Striking a work-life balance is challenging for most, and I can't blame them. And so, one and done appears to be more appealing, realistic, even practical. Millennials especially are more hard-nosed about life's challenges. They say they want to give their only child the best of the best. And so, one and done is their only option. And let's not forget, as a generation, millennials are more aware. They worry about the climate. They worry about the planet that their kids will be inheriting. They worry about the legacy they're leaving behind. They worry about the war in Europe, the rising inflation eating into savings, the toxic influences that are accessible through a click and a swipe. At the end of the day, whether you choose to have one kid or more, or none at all, it's your choice and yours alone. As parents, we want the best for our kids. But this year, in 2023, we're also more aware of our own limitations, our own strengths and weaknesses. And there's no shame in embracing them. So whatever choice you make, one and done, two and going strong, or none, you have to own it. Don't let nosy relatives fool you into thinking that your only child will be entitled, or that an only child needs company. Give that single child all the love and opportunity and watch her blossom. At the same time, don't let social media dictate how many children you should or shouldn't have. Brands have made parenting a business. Hacks are advertised, perfection is celebrated, picture-perfect posts are glorified. But remember, when you make that decision, a spreadsheet is not only practical, it's clever. So take a step back from social media, take a step back from over-familiar family members, take a step back from the glossy imagery of parenting and make your choice. Remember, parenting is a commitment, one you must honor once you make that choice. And on that note, it's a wrap on Gravitas tonight. Thanks for watching the show with me, Priyanka Sharma, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images.
Mm.